From Green 960 in San Francisco, I'm Beth Greer, and this is your Supernatural Life. My intention with this show is to help you see that there's a true natural approach to living a healthy, non-toxic life. But I recognize that it's probably easier to live that natural lifestyle here in America, and especially in the Bay Area. I feel so blessed to be living here with the natural beauty of its land and access to clean water, amazing farmers markets and natural food stores offering an abundance of organic produce, as well as outstanding alternative healthcare practitioners and wonderful schools. Now, most of the rest of the planet doesn't live like this. Over 1 billion people in the world live in extreme poverty, and many without access to safe drinking water or to good education. There's rampant hunger, disease, and a sense of hopelessness. Well, I had the privilege of meeting someone who's bringing hope to the hopeless and making a real global impact on our planet. Her name is Melinda Kramer, and she's founder and co-director of Women's Earth Alliance. Her organization empowers women around the world by providing them with tools like training, resources, and long-term solutions for the issues they deal with daily, like water, food, land, and climate change. Before founding WEA, Melinda worked around the world pursuing environmental justice, sustainable local economies, and indigenous rights. She lived in East Africa working with CARE Kenya on sustainable agriculture and health projects, and later worked with grassroots environmental movements in China, the Russian Far East, and Alaska. Welcome to your Supernatural Life, Melinda.
Thank you so much. It's just such an honor to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy that you're here. It was such a pleasure to meet you. And lots of people want to help save the planet, but you actually formed an organization that's doing it. And so tell us about what sparked your idea for WEA 5 years ago.
Well, every story has, a beginning, middle, and end, and then a beginning, middle, and end again. So it just felt like this work has been really cyclical for me. I think I came across issues where I saw women's leadership. I saw women really transforming their communities. Many times when I was a little girl, my own mother, when I was on sports teams, and then as I started to delve into my educational journey and I found myself traveling to different parts of the world, I again saw the just critical and central role that women play inside of our families, inside of our communities. And as I delved deeper and I started to spend time in more regions of the world that are underserved in a lot of ways, that are struggling with really basic issues like access to water, healthy food, safe land and homes to live in, I really started to see that women had it tough, that women were holding a great burden, and a burden that was disproportionate to anyone else on the planet. And that really moved me to action. I realized that these women were the key to the future. Every woman had a chance to really make a difference in her community, whether she was in the Bay Area, California, or in a rural area in East Africa. And I felt like something really simple, like connecting the dots between these women leaders, would really move something, could really make something happen. So that's just a really kind of bird's eye view of the journey that I've been on. But let me just say that it's been quite a rich one.
Yeah, it's fantastic what you've accomplished in 5 years. So your nonprofit is it's a very different model than what's out there, and you're really all about collaboration, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, the story of Women's Earth Alliance is really first and foremost based on seeing what wasn't working. On an everyday basis, there are stories that we hear from our colleagues, our Native American partners, women who are living right here in the United States, and many of whom have stories about being displaced from their traditional homelands to make way for industrial projects, for toxic industry, or across the world in India, our colleagues who are, many of whom are farmers, who are witnessing climate change, climate crises really tear apart their lives, their farms, their families, and our African colleagues who know all too well the personal and the communal dangers of water shortages as they have to walk hours to fetch water and miss the opportunity to gain an education or create a livelihood. And so these are the kinds of stories that, of course, unfortunately, are occurring every day around the world, thousands of times over. And And women really are central. They're at the center of this challenge, as I said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And so 5 years ago, myself and a number of other women who were working in communities, working or living in communities like these, came together because in the midst of these crises, we also saw something else happening. We saw leadership. We saw organizations being built that really had a vision for another way. And at the center of those communities and of those organizations so often was women.
Mm-hmm.
There they were, really holding it down and caring for their families, tending to the sick, teaching the children, fetching the water, you name it, harvesting the food. And our group launched Women's Earth Alliance to uplift and support this role that we saw as so critical, these voices that weren't being heard. And we knew that these women would play a central role in the repair of our Earth and really in the design of our future. So it was really just out of a vision, out of a need.
That's fantastic. I know your tagline reads, "When women thrive, communities thrive." So how hard was it to help the women, let's say, who are in impoverished areas, and many of them are taking care of lots of kids, they don't have access to education, and they're not really thought of very highly. From my travels, I noticed that the men sort of lead. And so how hard was it to kind of help support them?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the key tenets of Women's Earth Alliance is partnership. So we never launch a training program or an advocacy project without a partner, a regional partner who is working in the regions where we work, who really has a track record of success working in those communities. These organizations really understand the nuances in what's really happening in the landscape of the community, what the cultural dynamics are, really how to infiltrate and affect change through the networks that already exist in these regions. And so with a partnership with organizations like this, really augmenting, and uplifting the local knowledge and really supporting that with, additional women's leadership, additional resources and skills, we expand on what's already working in these regions. So our training programs, for example, all the trainers are from the region, who are often men and women who have really been dedicated to these issues, who maybe never had a chance to stand in front of a group of other leaders and share their leadership, share their knowledge. So our training programs are all about uplifting local knowledge and partnering with key organizations in the regions who really know what's happening and have a vision for where we can go.
That's really a smart way to do it, and obviously it's working really well. So you mentioned at the opening of the show that you traveled. Do you remember like your first trip and what was the most surprising thing that you saw?
Right. I have a few moments that really stand out for me. One of them was before I traveled internationally, and I was actually working inside of an environmental law firm in, of all places, rural Missouri. Actually, the law firm was based in St. Louis, and we were working in a community that had the largest lead smelter in the United States. It was a huge, gigantic lead project where there was literally soot on the sides of the houses. You could see the soot. Kids' blood lead levels were through the roof, and this small community was just being taken advantage of by a company that wasn't following the laws and were breaking various health standards. And I was so moved by the women in this community who came together. They started with knowing very little about the issue, very little about the laws that existed or the health threats, and they got themselves to a place where they were on the national news, they were holding press conferences, and they got that town listed on the national priorities list for the EPA, and they were the ones that were the drumbeat that got that issue on the map and really changed their reality. And I was just so taken by these. It was a group of mothers who just said no, just said no to this injustice, and they said yes to sustainability, to health for their children, and to a clean future. And so that really stuck with me.
And so you wanted to sort of bring that to the other countries that you visited?
Sorry? Say it again?
You wanted to bring that ability of the women here in Missouri to the women in other countries?
Well, at that point, it really was just an observation, and I
Mm-hmm.
said, well, something's really working here. And what I ended up seeing in my travels in Africa or in the Russian Far East or in China was actually something very similar, where grassroots organizations or community leaders who, without a lot of resources at their fingertips, just took these issues into their own hands. I remember that there was a woman at that press conference, and she stood up and she said, I am not an environmentalist. I am a mother, and I care about my children's future. I care about this Earth's future. And it was just so moving to hear her make that distinction and just say, I'm a mother. I'm just a person who cares. And I've heard that so many times, and very similar stories in my travels. And I also remember the pain of what I witnessed and just really firsthand experiencing that injustice, my times living in East Africa. I remember one place where I was living with a family, and there was a young woman who was my peer. We were the same age, and our lives were so different. She didn't have a chance to go to school because it was her responsibility to fetch the water. And so every day I'd walk with her, and sometimes it would take up to 4 hours to access a water point that wasn't clean. It wasn't safe water, but it was the only water that was available in her region. And that was what her future looked like. And that was the burden that she had to carry literally on her back, on her shoulders, on her head every day. And I just said to myself, this really isn't right. And so it was a combination of seeing both the injustice and really feeling that to my core, and also seeing the possibility, seeing what women can do when they come together with very little, and the vision that they have. And so I just felt like, and a lot of others have now joined me in this experience, that when women have the resources and the tools and the allies they need to create change, communities show improvements across the board. And that's why we say when women thrive, communities thrive, because studies show that when women do have access, there are improvements, marked improvements in education, reduction in disease and death, job creation, restored ecosystems, food security, cultural preservation. It's just tremendous.
Fantastic. Well, fabulous. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Melinda Kramer of the Women's Earth Alliance. We'll be right back.